Hello everyone. Today I'm taking lead on About Behaviorism, B.F. Skinner, regarding Chapter 8 on Causes and Reasons. This chapter was very interesting regarding Skinner's thought process, which resulted in me thinking about things more in a greater depth. Now, of course, there were concepts I was a bit confused about, but I hope you guys can follow along with me, as well as provide me with insight on your thought process so I may have a better understanding on things I'm confused about. Throughout the video, I will of course state the concepts I'm referring to, along with their pages, so you may follow along with me if you need to look back at your book to have a better insight to my understandings. With this chapter, Skinner spoke more so about individuals being exposed to contingencies and the consequences that can take an effect resulting in a change of behavior. The first concept I would like to talk about in this chapter on page 132 is commands, advice, and warnings. With this chapter, after I finish reading it, I believe Skinner is telling us the way words are communicated to an individual will result into how they react. On page 133, this sentence, which I'm about to read, stood out to me the most. A person heeds warnings and takes advice depending upon what has happened in similar circumstances in the past. With this, if we communicate things in a demanding way, an individual may express fear or may become hesitant in completing a task they are demanded to do, which results in a consequence. When things are communicated in a gentle manner or showing that they are being helped, an individual is more willing to listen because they know there is a positive consequence to the communication. So, being that said, upon our completion of our degree, it is important to be aware of how things are communicated to individuals. If we constantly demand orders to our clients, it implies we are forcing them to complete a task, and it will be a continuous process in regards to this. The second concept I would like to talk about on page 133 is directions and instruction. With this, directions and instructions allow for an individual to move step by step with tasks in order to accomplish them effectively. This brings me to my clients I provide private swim lessons to. At my job, because in the beginning, my clients responded to my remarks regarding their strokes, whether it was fixing their arms when they're swimming freestyle or giving them advice on how to efficiently kick. Or I provide input on how to improve their techniques, as I just stated before, and I tell them when to do things and how to do them. Eventually, I do not have to do such acts because they have a better understanding now of what is correct and what isn't when swimming. I have prepared them to be able to swim on their own, resulting in them no longer needing private swim lessons. Skinner is telling us that the less we communicate things, it allows for individuals to understand things in order for them to behave in a properly and follow the behaviors being displayed of the individual instructing them, which would be me. It is important for individuals to follow the advice of others who have great experience with what is being done, such as my private swim lessons example that I just provided. The third concept I would like to discuss on page 135 is the governmental and religious laws concept, which stood out to me the most because Skinner is basically saying there are always consequences to our actions. If there are those who do not wish to follow rules or laws that are set in place, then, as we all know, unfortunately, there are consequences to their doings. If people stay out of trouble, and of course, there obviously won't be a result of them being punished for disobeying. An example for me that allowed me to understand, and I hope helps you understand, was if an individual murders someone and they are caught, they will suffer the consequences of standing trial and receiving the likelihood of being forced to serve time in prison for their wrongdoings. Therefore, we have laws and rules set in place now so that society can have order and there isn't complete chaos, because, as we all know, if we do not follow what is right, there will be consequences of punishments set in place. Laws help shape behaviors, and it is up to the individual on how they want to respond and express their behaviors. This brings me back to the folklore, maxims, and proverbs concepts, which would be the fourth concept on page 135, because this section confused me a bit. I hope I have grasped what I have read, but I hope someone can provide me with a better insight. On page 135, when I read, some forms of instruction can be transmitted from generation to generation because the contingencies they describe are long-lasting. When reading this, I took it as Skinner stating we should help individuals on educating them on how to show proper behaviors. What is taught now, from generation to generation, will result in the same experiences of rules to the next generation and will also shape how proper behaviors should be displayed. If someone could provide me with better insight on this, it would be greatly appreciated. With that being said, I took this as proverbs, maxims, and commands as though they are rules for individuals to follow. The fifth concept I would like to talk about on page 138 is the contingency-shaped versus rule-governed behavior. A specific sentence on page 139 that stood out to me that allowed me to have an understanding to what Skinner is saying is, a person who is following directions, taking advice, heeding warnings, or obeying rules or laws does not behave precisely as one who has been directly exposed to the contingencies, because a description of the contingencies is never complete or exact. When I read this, I took it as if an individual has not yet been exposed to contingencies from a result of not following rules or laws that have been set in place, it is important to ensure that they have been exposed. This is because it will allow for an individual to learn that there are always consequences to their actions when laws are set in place. What helped me understand this concept more was thinking about law enforcement laws. If you are in a car and let's say you decide to run a red light, either the camera or an officer who's on the other side of the road will see you. What will be the result? Think about this for a second. Well, the officer will write them a ticket, which will give them exposure to a contingency and hopefully resulting in them following the traffic laws in the near future. With the sixth concept on page 142 of Reason and Reasons, to me, Skinner's saying there are always reasonings to why certain behavior is displayed. The book provides a great example on page 142 of the reason I went to the bank was to get some money. They state where they have gone and why they are going to the bank. This can be transferred to individuals who decide to disobey the laws because there, of course, is a reasoning to why they have done such an action. The seventh concept on page 150 regarding truth provided me with a lot of insight. This is because Skinner, I believe, is saying truth is provided by individuals depending specifically in the context of that truth. So, maybe if someone is being accused of something, and depending on the accusation, will tell us how truthful that individual will be when they are questioned. Of course, there are other interesting headings, but the ones I described stood out to me the most in analyzing and stating how I understand these concepts. I would love to hear what concepts interested you guys as well. And the concepts I also stated, I believe were the key points in this chapter. From my completion of this chapter, I believe Skinner is trying to tell us that individuals are not always aware of consequences. When they are not exposed to what is right and wrong. This is why rules, laws, are set in place in order to help guide individuals in responding and showing a proper behavior. Constant exposure to and how to do things effectively helps individuals into having a better understanding of things. He is always saying that when behaviors occur, it is important to analyze the occurrence of that behavior and what contingencies were present at that time. A lingering question I have regarding this chapter is, Skinner states when individuals learn the laws of science, they have ability to understand contingencies that could occur later on. How do you feel about this? Do you agree with the statement, or do you believe an individual has to be exposed to consequences in order to have understanding of their actions? Or should they just learn about consequences of, let's say, not following the rules in order to have an understanding that rules and or laws are set in place for a reason? Another lingering question I have is when Skinner said, Erasmus said on page 145, "The life of reason is no doubt admirable, but there would be nothing to be reasonable about if it were not for the effect of food, sex, and other basic reinforcers." I have many interpretations of this, of individuals do not live happy lives unless there is something to look forward to or there is a prize. How would you interpret this? I can't wait to hear about your guys' thought process and comments so I'm able to think about my statements more.